Thank you, everyone. My name is Brendan Doohan. I'm the president of the Riverview Neighborhood Association, which just celebrated its 40th anniversary. So it's this neighborhood here. And our mission is pretty simple. We tried to maintain and improve the quality of life in this neighborhood. If you rewind 40 years ago, this park was sort of run down. It was not a place you'd want to walk your dog or take your kids. Fast forward to today, it's a place where we had a after school, end of the school year party with my son's class. There's dog meetups here, and there's soccer games, and you can see people's lives flourishing. We have a farmer's market every Sunday, which is a place where people come together and connect. So the neighborhood really has improved quite a bit. And part of our mission is to improve the transportation, right? A lot of people come to the Heights because of its great transport options. They may live in the city, they may live in Hudson County, elsewhere, but a big reason why people come here and stay here is the great commutability to the city and to other places nearby. One thing we hear from a lot from folks is maybe they want to see different changes, right? We have bus lines, and we'll get into this in a bit, that maybe need to be updated or changed a bit. So we're going to go ahead and discuss that. And we've heard from that. We've just been working on that with the Senator's team and with NJ Transit. And so this really effort here is the culmination of months of work with Charlie and Jonas and other folks on the RNA. I'll go over quickly the agenda, then I'll hand it over to the Senator. First, we're going to have the Senator is going to give us an overview of the staff and policy of NJ Transit. Then we're going to hear from the President and CEO of NJ Transit, Kris Kolluri. And then Charlie Metzger, the chair of the RNA Transit Committee, is going to give an outline of some high-level concerns relating to transit and the bus service in this area. And we've had these questions from the public for the last month or so. Then we're going to do a Q&A from the audience here, moderated by the Senator. And then last, we're going to have summary and next steps from the Senator and the RNA. So thank you all for coming, and I can't wait to get started. Pass it over to the Senator. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody hear me okay? Yes. All right. I'd like to begin with a moment of silence for the young child that we lost at 6th and Jersey yesterday in a horrific and unimaginable loss 2 days before Father's Day, unnecessarily to traffic violence. Thank you. I know that a lot of us, it's very raw, and I know whether you're a parent or not, that's a very emotional and senseless loss for our community, and it emphasizes the need both to get folks out of car, but the overall need for Vision Zero, for reliable mass transit, and for all of these things, urban infrastructure, how they're woven together, not just for functionality, but to keep us all safe. And it's Flag Day, and it's a very strange time in our democracy. So I just know that it's like a heavy week today. There's an assassination attempt on two state legislators, and their spouses, and political violence in any form must be condemned. But this is a heavy week. So anyway, thank you for turning out in the rain, and thank you to Kris Kolluri, our guest of honor, for coming up on the Saturday of Father's Day weekend. I know we had planned on another week, and then something came up, some kind of a strike or something like that in your job. So thankfully we got through it, but we are very, very grateful for you to come up here and to accommodate the community's request for a Saturday so we could maximize attendance. I know that there are folks watching at home as well because this is being streamed. I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Kris Kolluri. I know that many of you were present when his predecessors come up and held 3 similar roundtables in what was then the 33rd and now is the 32nd legislative district. But before we go any further, I want to acknowledge, speaking of the 32nd Legislative District, that its Democratic nominee, and I'm quite certain will be the next state assemblywoman representing the 32nd District, and I'll be honored to serve alongside her. Please welcome Katie Brennan. And there are a number of candidates for office, for municipal office in the November election here as well, and I thank them for their participation in our democracy. Elvin, Veronica, did I miss anyone? Jake, yep. Anyone else? Okay. Kris Kolluri is very, very interesting. He's something of a Renaissance man, and I say that he's a dear friend, which is how we got him up on Father's Day weekend from Princeton to Jersey City on a Saturday. But he is a former commissioner of transportation. He ran the Schools Development Authority. He was the CEO of the Gateway Transit Commission. And as an Indian American, we don't claim Bobby Jindal, but people think, oh, he was the first South Asian governor in American history. Fake news. Actually, for was it like half a day, a couple hours? 24 hours. For about 24 hours, Kris Kolluri was acting governor. He was appointed transportation commissioner by Governor Corzine. We didn't have a lieutenant governor then. And then the cabinet members that are next in line in succession, the Senate president was out of the state. So then Commissioner Kolluri was acting governor. So he's actually the first Indian American governor in American history, which I'm proud of because, again, we do not claim Bobby Jindal. So he is, if anyone can take on the labyrinth of bureaucracy and lack of dedicated recurring funding, our fault as a legislature, Katie, not Transit's fault, and other things that have inhibited New Jersey Transit from delivering in the way that I think we would agree in our community that commuters deserve. If anyone can take that on, I wish he would be staying on for more than a year and more than in an interim capacity. Kris is among the rarefied company that would be equipped to do it. So we invited him up here so that he can hear firsthand from the concerns that we have. His staff are not strangers to the routes that we're going to be discussing today, to this community. They've been troopers. We don't always agree. They're incredibly thick-skinned for enduring all my criticism over the years. They've also been very responsive. I will credit Kris's predecessor for that in particular. And even when the answer is not one that I want to hear, they always supply me with an answer. So I want to thank them for their public service. When ridership was returning to pre-pandemic levels after the global pandemic, and they anticipated that demand, they were responsive to specific concerns that RNA brought forward. And I especially want to shout out Roger Heitman over the years. He's been a resource to me. I have relayed those things, and in some ways they've been responsive. And in others, they'll hear from us where there is work still to be done today, and that's the purpose. One example, by the way, is just in the fall when they got a fresh order of 60 more articulated buses. Those are the accordion-style buses that once we first, Roger recalls, started putting them into service, we saw some of the congestion alleviated on the 119. Well, almost all of those 60 articulated buses in that order came to our community and came to the 119 and the 10, which the Kearney busport has been useful for. So I want to turn it over to President Kolluri for his introduction, but we're grateful for you listening. We'll be even more grateful if you have some good news to bring back on your next visit, if that's not asking too much. Maybe one more before you move on. And again, we're appreciative. Please welcome Kris.
Senator, thank you. Only you could have brought me out on Father's Day weekend, and I'm truly grateful for your leadership and friendship. And Katie, you and I spent time in Camden when you were at HMFA, and I wish you all the best as you move on to hopefully join the senator as being an assemblyman, and also for the other candidates who are running, I wish you all the best. Look, this is, to me, one of the most important things I could do. I'm going to keep my remarks very brief because I'm here to listen more than to talk. But I want to introduce you to my colleagues specifically that the senator acknowledged. Mike Elcoin, who's the SVP of bus and light rail operations and surface transportation. He is an extraordinary public servant, and there is not a more important person that I rely on day in, day out to make sure that I get answers to the bus and light rail operations. Joining him is Bobby Big, or Bobby, there he is. He's the Deputy General Manager. John Del Colli is the Head of Legislative Affairs, and Matt McHale runs our federal policy shop. We wanted to come because we think it's important to sort of understand firsthand. It's not new to some of my colleagues, but it's certainly new to them, to me. But let me sort of, maybe what I thought I'll do this afternoon is to sort of frame a couple of issues for you before we delve into specific bus routes and enhanced service that you may ask. Because I think I've always functioned best when I try to communicate what sort of is happening globally within New Jersey Transit, because that context, I think, informs our discussion. As the senator correctly said, this agency has been around for 45 years. This is the first time in 45 years where we have the funding to barely keep us at even par. And I want you to understand that for a second, or take a pause for a second. 45 years has gone by, and this is the first time New Jersey Transit is going to be at break-even point for the first time. And there's a reason for it, and I think the senator mentioned it. I don't believe in apportioning blame, and I believe in talking about facts. For one reason or the other, New Jersey Transit has gone through multiple cycles, through multiple administrations, without having kind of dedicated funding that is necessary. The corporate transit fees was a very difficult issue for the senator and other members of the legislature to vote on. And that is supposed to generate about $815 million a year, so we can get that money into New Jersey Transit. Just so you don't misunderstand it, that $815 million is not new money. It is merely replacing the money that the federal government gave during COVID, dollar for dollar. Very important to understand. So when people say, why aren't you doing X, Y, or Z, context is very important, right? And I wanted you to know that. Second, in terms of capital investment, so there's operating, which the corporate transit fees is going to fund, and then there's the capital portion of it. That's what we use to buy buses and rolling stock. In 45 years, could you believe it, we still have rail cars on our system that were built in the 1970s. You don't get to run a modern railroad system or a bus system when you have rail cars that are built in the 1970s. Thanks to Mike, the bus system has been slowly making progress, and the senator talked about it, but that funding primarily comes from the federal government. So good news, when I came into this job about 5.5 months ago, my biggest concern was that the federal government under a new administration would somehow reduce the funding. And that would have had a huge impact on our ability to buy any buses. But good news is I don't see evidence standing in front of you now that that is going to happen in the near term. So what do these two data points mean? corporate transit fees, and funding for capital. One, on the capital side, for the first time in 45 years, by the time this governor, Governor Murphy, and I leave office by the end of December, we would have placed all the buses to replace the existing rolling stock and all the rail cars that are older. That means by 2031, for the first time in 45 years, the entire system will be modernized. It has never happened in the history of New Jersey Transit. And that's a huge deal, only because we have funding to do it. On the operating side, we have a 5-year window of corporate transit fees. What is the softness that I worry about? 2 things. One is if there's a recession, corporate transit fees will go down, and that's going to have a huge impact on our operating budget. And I say this because you need to make sure you're staying on top of this. Second, if the tariffs have an impact, it's going to have an impact both on our capital as well as the operating. I want you to know that. Third, on average, our budget just organically has to grow about $200 million a year without doing anything, meaning just to run the organization as is with the service we have, we'll have to add $200 million to the budget. So think about it this way. The corporate transit fees is $815 million, right? In addition to that, next year, we're going to need $200 million. The year after, we're going to need another $200 million. The year after that, another $200 million. You need to know this because I think sometimes it is very hard to understand why it is so complicated to just add another bus line or another bus or another train car. I just wanted to give you some of the underpinning reasons for why some of these challenges exist. That doesn't mean we won't do it, and there's evidence of that. What is it? When Coach USA, when Academy, and a bunch of private companies during the pandemic decided they're no longer going to provide this neighborhood, and this city, the service, guess who stepped up? New Jersey Transit. And you know this. And I've gotten feedback on that. And it means a world to us that we're able to provide you that service because somehow the privates woke up and understood that providing mass transit is not a profit-making enterprise. Why is that? On average, do you know what the system recoups on average for every dollar you invest as taxpayers? Can somebody tell me? System-wide. I'm talking about rail and bus. Just, okay. It's a little higher than that. 46. 46 cents on the dollar. That means 54 cents is the deficit from the moment you give us $1, there's a 54-cent deficit. Now, you could say, well, that means you must be really bad at what you do. In fact, this is a global trend. Hong Kong happens to be the only mass transit system that makes dollar for dollar. Do you know why? Boom. It is a real estate play. So, what I wanted to convey to you in my remarks is not a bunch of excuses, but a bunch of reasoned explanation for an extraordinarily complicated budget process that has to be sort of toggled back and forth to achieve some of the objectives that I'm going to hear from you today about. On top of that, you have the private sector who's continuing to run away. Every time we think they want to be partners, they go away. Thank God Coach is back, we hope. Academy, we think, is back, we hope. But ultimately, the responsibility comes down to us. So what has happened in this year's budget for all those bus lines that just fell off our radar? Your radar, I should say. We went to the senator and the legislature this year, right now. He's going to vote on a budget. $13 million just for the bus lines we picked up. Just for the bus lines from the privates. That is the magnitude of what we're talking about, okay? So I am so grateful that on a rainy Saturday, that you would take the time to come and express your concerns. What you're going to have on this side of the table are people willing to listen, understand, but one thing I have never done, and I'll never do, is not just give you an answer to satisfy you here and walk away and say, hopefully they'll forget it. I won't do it. I've never done it. I won't do it here. So what you're going to hear from me is an honest answer to questions. If there are challenges that we think we can address, 86 is one. The young lady in front of me said that she's going to answer, raise 86. I think we have some good news on it. And I'll let Mike explain it. But I think what you're going to hear from us is a very rational conversation, which is what I think you should expect from your public servants, and a truthful answer of how we intend to solve these problems. But in the long run, what I'm going to need from you, and certainly Senator Mukherjee, and hopefully Assemblywoman Brennan, is a continued dedicated funding source to make sure we keep up with the demand that this neighborhood and this city are going to need in order to function the way you want to function. So I said won't speak for a long time, and I did, and I apologize. So I'm happy to answer any questions, Senator, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, and we're also going to take questions from the audience, but we have gotten, we've received submissions of questions before this roundtable in anticipation thereof, so I'm going to ask a few of those. Oh, sorry. That's right, which is the most critical. So, Chairman Metzger, please.
Thanks, everyone, for being here. Can you hear me? Perfect. And Senator Mukherjee, thank you for your partnership. And President Kolluri, thanks for making time on a rainy holiday weekend. My name's Charlie Metzger. I have the honor of serving as the chair of the RNA Transit Committee. And I'm going to review quickly the issues that we have been discussing in dialogue with NJT for about a year now. So a year ago, RNA, which, as Brandon was explaining, has been working in this neighborhood for 40 years, stood up this transit committee in response to a number of citizen complaints and concerns. And we're operating from a very specific frame, which is that a great city deserves great transit. And in addition to the very real structural issues that President Kolluri just provided, RNA thinks that another important framing for this conversation and for our dialogue with NJT is that this is a great city. It cannot remain great. It cannot realize its potential without a system of public transit that is commensurate to economic development and citizen concerns. We sent out a survey to our membership, which is thousands of people, and over the course of a number of weeks, we received a bunch of concerns about the piece of public transit in the Heights that is provided by New Jersey Transit. And we shared those concerns with John Del Cole, who's here today, and with John's boss, Paul Wyckoff. We had a meeting about a year ago to raise these concerns. And President Kolluri, I'm going to begin on a bit of a downer. Very little of those concerns have been addressed, to be real. No one at this meeting and no one at NJT or in the legislature is well served by burying our heads in the sand on this. We understand the structural limitations that you are working with, but as you'll see, a number of these concerns are actually cash neutral. So with that said, I'm going to take about 5 minutes and run through the list of concerns that we raised with Paul and John, who's here today. I'm going to begin with the 119. All of you have this issues agenda, which we passed out on the way in. If you could please turn to the page that's labeled Exhibits to NJT Agenda. There is a phenomenon in public transit delivery called bus bunching. And if you don't know what that term means, I guarantee you understand what it means intuitively because you've lived it, if you've taken the 119. And the purpose of this exhibit is to show direct evidence of what bus bunching looks like on the 119 on a day-to-day basis. So, President Kolluri, what you have are screenshots from the last few months of the... Do me a favor. Yeah, of course. Call me Kris. Sure. Fair enough. We try to start by being more formal than less. Great. So Kris, what you have in front of you are screenshots that RNA members took the last year showing real-time arrivals on the 119 and the 123 at various times during the life cycle of NJT bus during the week. So, to point you to one example, a few days ago, on June 12th at 8:33 in the morning, this is what real-time arrivals at a major stop in the Heights looked like. A bus arriving in 2 minutes, a bus that's delayed, we don't know what delayed means, then 2 buses arriving within 4 minutes of each other. Another example from that same morning, same stop, Congress and Central, arguably the busiest stop on the 119 in the Heights. A bus arriving in 12 minutes, and 12 minutes, and 13 minutes. And I can tell you, as someone who uses this system, how this is going to shake out. The first bus is going to be jammed when it arrives. The next bus is going to be half empty, and the third bus is going to be completely empty. It's going to have a driver and maybe 1 or 2 people on an articulated bus with a rated capacity, I think, of over 100. This, just to put a fine point on it, is a waste of state resources. And the crazy thing is that it is solvable. So if you would all turn the page, please, to the last page of your packet, we've included here just a sampling of large-scale studies about how to address bus bunching. Bus bunching is solvable. The transit scientists have solved it. It is actually a better use of state resources to space out buses with headway maintenance and staggered departure times and departure origin locations. This is a solvable problem. And so our first request of you and your esteemed staff is, will you work with us to implement best practices from transit science to solve wasteful bus bunching?
Can I, Mike, maybe you and Bobby, I just want to understand this. As I see it, one of the reasons why bunching happens is if there's inherent congestion in the system.
Sure.
Is there a dedicated lane for these buses?
There is not.
Is there a county road?
There is not. There's a county road, which is John F. Kennedy, that the 119 uses south of the Heights, but no dedicated lane there either.
So all our buses follow all the other traffic? Yeah?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Oh, sure.
Me or Kris?
Sorry.
Kris. Perfect.
Mike, I just want to understand.
So I would suggest that bus bunching is not an organic issue.
Sure.
It's not something that happens on its own. There are a multitude of factors that contribute to bus bunching, not the least of which is the massive amount of construction going on at Journal Square. All of the adjustments that we've made as a result of that, the high volumes of traffic through this zone, and there's a bus every 5 minutes. So one traffic light that one catches, the other one will catch up to it. Thank you. So some of the suggestions that you typically see in a bus bunching solution scenario would suggest that you skip stops or that you start buses further up the line. And that's great for the people who are benefiting from that. However, when you start buses further up the line, you're reducing frequency for the people at the beginning of the line. And it's great to skip a stop if you're on the bus, but if you're one waiting for the bus, that becomes more challenging. So it's a balance, and we need to find that balance in those areas where they're achievable. We have eliminated stops in some communities because they just simply were too close together.
Right.
We're happy to work with the community to implement something like that. We agree.
Can I ask this question? So
Yeah.
perhaps let me counter by saying,
Sure.
you work with us to try and make sure we get a dedicated bus lane. Because look, I'll tell you, because part of my thinking is, and I think this is our frustration.
Yep.
A city like New York has figured out how to have dedicated bus lanes.
Sure.
And if you've been to New York City, it isn't exactly a city known for its geographic luxuries.
Yeah.
Right? So one way to address this, you give us the ability to work with you on a dedicated bus lane that is completely timed on signals. That might help alleviate.
Yep.
I'll take you to, we'll go talk to the county executive about this together. Yeah,
Great.
100%. It's been suggested in the past, it was, under different leadership, I think it might hopefully will receive a warmer reception, but I think that's absolutely critical.
And in addition to that, you got to make sure the light signals are timed as well. So I think, yeah, because what Mike is expressing is, this is obviously, you understand this. We're not trying to bunch buses on purpose.
Yes.
There is a inherent conflict between things out of our control and things within our control.
Yep.
I think what we're suggesting is if there's a harmonization of those two conflict points between what is out of our control and what is in our control, I think we'll have a much better solution that is optimal to make sure all riders, not just riders in this neighborhood, benefit from our 119 service and other services you're talking about.
So we've solved issue 1, is what I'm taking away from that.
At least I think we're attempting to work
Yeah.
together.
Thank you for your partnership. No, we appreciate it. All right, the next issue on the agenda is, as everyone in this room knows, the world changed during and after COVID, and far more people, far more commuters who rely on the 119 and the 123 and the 126 and the 125 than before COVID are now working irregular hours, meaning that there are more commuters who are commuting after rush hour in the morning, late at night, on weekends, and on holidays. And if I could please encourage everyone to flip back to the exhibit that has all these screenshots. You'll notice that if you look at the bottom right screenshot, this is a screenshot from a couple of months ago at 1:15 in the afternoon. And if you are a restaurant worker, if you work in nightlife or hospitality in New York City, you are not necessarily working a 9-to-5 job, and you are probably commuting at odd hours. You'll notice, Kris, that there's a bus arriving in 2 minutes, a bus arriving in 2 minutes, and again, that's a bunching problem. And then there's no bus for 42 minutes, right? 41 minutes. And what this produces is a situation in which you have people who rely on the 119, who are working in the city, who cannot commute on a timetable that works for them and have to waste time either sitting at a stop waiting for a bus or reorient their lives because there is just too infrequent service in the middle of the day. And a related problem, if you turn the page, Kris, is the problem of what we call ghost buses. I don't know if that's a technical term from transit science, but Kris and Mike, if you look, there are many times during the day when the real-time arrival portion of the NJT app does not show any actual buses with a bus number arriving at a particular time. What it shows you is the scheduled arrival. And as you were just alluding to, Mike, because of construction and traffic lights, that's a highly unreliable indicator of when the bus is actually going to arrive. As someone who uses this system, I can tell you what's going on. There is actually a bus that will arrive at some point in the next, call it, hour or two. It's just that bus's transponder is either turned off or it's not working, hence the term ghost bus. And because the service is so infrequent and unreliable at certain points of the day and the weekend, this makes it absolutely impossible to plan your commute. So we have 2 requests. 1, can we partner with you to find a way to reallocate some of the wasted resources from rush hour, the buses that run empty because of the busing, to the middle of the day and weekends? That's problem 1. And problem 2, can we partner with you to fix the problem of ghost buses?
Sure. Talk about the communication part. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Can you
Thank
talk
you.
about the communication part, Mike, first? I want the communication part.
Testing 1, 2, 1, 2. Right.
I wanna
That's
make
it, the
sure-
speaker. So some of the answer is coming. All right, we have something on the buses that we got initially when we started real-time predictions.
Yep.
And those transponders are as old as the real-time predictions are. They're Ivan 3s.
Right.
So we got a federal grant for public-facing Wi-Fi on buses.
Mhm.
Part of that project will replace the Ivan 3s with Ivan 5s. So you cannot shut the transponder off. So the driver can't be a ghost and decide they don't want anybody to know they're coming. The issue is connectivity.
Okay.
And the system, the driver thinks they're signed on. It's a phenomenon we've been trying to overcome through technology. And when you get to the road supervisor who's checking on the bus, everything appears as if the operator signed on, but underneath it lost its connection en route. So that is primarily the cause of ghost buses, and they come and go. And then sometimes what you'll find, rather than have people not know that there's a bus even scheduled to come, what we've done is we've taken the system and we've defaulted it to show you a scheduled bus coming
Right.
if there's something technologically wrong with the real-time prediction, so that you don't walk away thinking there's no bus. It's coming, it's just not signed on properly for a host of reasons, most of which are the Ivan 3s, which should be being replaced next year.
But we will work with you on the comm stuff, because I think one of the things that I've tried to focus on with my colleagues is to make sure I've focused obviously a lot on the rail side, on the ability to communicate with our customers in real time when there's a problem. Interestingly enough, buses, as you can imagine, there's a lot higher volume
Sure.
of trips than on trains. But I think if the technology fix is step one, we'd like to understand from you if you have other suggestions that will help you
Yep.
get to a better information profile that'll give your fellow residents a better communication access. But I want to now understand this infrequent service. I understand.
Yep.
But you said 2 minutes, 2 minutes, and 42. Is that again, Mike, because of the whole? I just want to understand.
So some of the challenge is balancing resources.
Right.
So
Thanks, Tyler.
some of the challenge is balancing resources. So as we add resources, everything is ridership driven.
Sure.
We're trying to respond to ridership across the state. This is one of the regions where New Jersey Transit has poured the most resources into, not just in articulated buses, but in frequency. We've grown the service. I think we added 31 trips to the 119 in the last, there's 78 trips across the 119 and the 10 that have been added in the last 3 years.
Yep.
That's clearly more than anything else that we've done. But one of the challenges that we also had was there's only so much traffic you can throw at a region. There's only so many buses you can throw at a region. So when we started to introduce the articulated buses, a lot of that was an effort to try and make sure that the Port Authority bus terminal was more efficient, and you can carry more people with the same operator. So we're happy to work with you on trying to make sure that we have the most predictable service that we can have. But we're ridership driven, so the off-peak is based on the ridership demand that we have and the resources that we have to apply to it. There's a 40-minute frequency in the off-peak,
Yep.
but we have grown the peak to a 5-minute headway because that's really where we're going to be able to pour the most resources into the place that needs it the most. And we don't deny that the off-peak needs it as well.
Yep.
And there are plans in the future to do that. But as Kris suggested, we just got the $13 million that we spent on the private carrier collapse throughout this last 2 or 3 years. So right now we have finally gotten back to where we were before the private carriers started to collapse from a manpower perspective, which means that we have enough manpower to need more. We are still struggling for bus operators. The articulated buses helped us tremendously because each operator carries 40% more people, so we're able to meet the growth. And it shouldn't be lost on everyone that one of the biggest challenges that we have isn't necessarily meeting the demand, it's meeting the growth. You know, we have dedicated resources to this region, but the 119 and the 10 have grown like 80%.
Right.
So we have poured that much resources into the system to keep up with it. But you know, at some point, you know, we need to start and pick and choose where we can best allocate them, and we're happy to work with you to do that.
So let me throw out a number more for the senator and future assemblywoman. $750,000. That is the number you need every time you want to introduce one new bus into the system. It's $750,000 to $800,000 a bus. That is think about that, that's on a 16-hour schedule. So essentially, that is for the drivers, and the capital, and the maintenance. So that is rough justice. Think about it like that. Anytime you want, reallocation of is different,
Yep.
right? Adding new bus, every time you touch one, it's about $800,000.
There is a lot more that we could discuss from this list. In the interest of time, I'm going to pass the mic to Senator Mukherjee to review the questions that we got in advance of the meeting and take questions from the field.
But can I just sort of broadly say, this is very helpful to understand practically what is being, what is happening on the ground. And our job is to see if there's a way to recalibrate it. And if the answer is yes, we can recalibrate it. Communication sounds like we can do. The bus lane sounds like we should be able to do together, right? So this is exactly what I was hoping this conversation would be, like to sort of block and tackle each of the problems and see if we can sort of make progress. And if the answer in the end of the process is it just can't happen for two reasons. One, physical limitations. Two, there's no money. That's a different set of problems that we can deal with.
Great. Thank you.
Can we please give Charlie a round of applause? So staying on the, I'm going to take these out of order just for the flow of conversation, because one of the questions related to real-time bus locations and reliability and technology. So it's welcome news about the modernization going from IBAN 3 to IBAN 5. A year is a long time to continue to suffer inaccurate real-time reporting. With the assistance, and this is less of a question and more of a proposal or an invitation to look at potential stopgap measures. I can't speak to the veracity of this information, but I asked what others have done, other agencies have done in the course of upgrading from IBAN 3 to IBAN 5, and ChatGPT claims that LA Metro, Portland TriMet, and some other agencies have used some combination of portable LTE routers or outfitting just consumer-style phones to supplement the IBAN 3 until you have a fully LTE-compatible 5 system, external antennae, things like that. So I wonder if maybe that's something we can look at so that we can bolster connectivity on the existing IBAN 3 systems that the buses are outfitted with over the course of the next year to do something about
Senator, we will absolutely do that. In fact, the board authorized, if my memory serves me right, the board already authorized the Wi-Fi upgrades. Why don't we, get back to you on a schedule, and maybe we can try to sort of prioritize the implementation, if you will.
Amazing.
And second, if there's a stopgap measure, we're happy to consider.
Can I just request that you repeat, what is the manufacturer and the name exactly of the transponder technology
Well,
that you use for this?
we can get back. Yeah, I do know. I don't know.
Well, Clever Devices.
Clever
it
Devices.
is our vendor and have been from the outset of all of these real-time predictions, which initially started as bus stop announcements, and it's been built organically off of that platform. So Clever Devices is our system, and they do Chicago, they do LA. They're, it's a pretty standard platform at this point.
Look, I mean, I not only empathize with you, but I sympathize with you because I take the train every day from Princeton. There is no Wi-Fi, and you would think that between Verizon and T-Mobile and AT&T would have better connection. The answer is no. It is immensely frustrating to me that there is no Wi-Fi on the trains, and there's a real reason for it because one is a Northeast Corridor we don't own, Amtrak owns. The older cars have asbestos in them, so we can't drill on them. It's just like the problems just keep compounding every time you want to do one thing. And I have 12 months to do all this. But I hear you. What we want to communicate with you is, one is we understand what you're asking. Our job is to see if, again, if we can sort of move the progress dial faster and maybe supplement that with other technologies so we can get you a better response in the short term.
That's great. Okay, so we have spoken actually at the last roundtable, the post-pandemic one, and we had spoken about new bus, the study, reassessing schedules and routes and service needs for Hudson County more broadly. I want to talk a little about, since we're in the Jersey City Heights, I want to talk a little about the Jersey City Heights. We're in a densely populated community in one of the most densely populated counties in the country, which is home to 6 out of 10 of the most densely populated municipalities in the entire country, right here in Hudson County. And so we give New Jersey Transit certainly a lot of business, which is a good thing, and we appreciate the attention that you're paying to us by being here today. But at the end of the day, we're on the more inelastic end of the demand curve in terms of the business we supply to New Jersey Transit. With respect to the additional units and density that we expect will be coming on in the coming months and years, that demand is going to continue to go up. And years ago, I think in my first term, where some of us were talking on Palisade Avenue about the additional density that we expect in Journal Square in the Heights, and the 119 at that point was weekday peak service only. Roger was very involved. We didn't have weekend service. We didn't have midday weekday service. We worked together and appreciate that we totally overhauled the 119 and made improvements to the 123, a couple other routes. But we're at that point again. We do know the additional units are going to come online. The population's going to go up, so I hope that we're anticipating and planning for that. But in the meantime, this also could go to the bunching issue even before we get a dedicated bus lane, at least perhaps for certain hours to start. If we could create or split the 119 line so that from the Palisades to New York City, it goes through Hoboken, would that relieve ridership and address the Journal Square issue you mentioned? And more broadly, can you speak to where we are on reassessing bus schedules and service needs for the Heights and what we can kind of expect from the new bus framework study revisiting of the current offerings?
Mike, why don't you answer the first question about whether you can split the 119 schedule and what that looks like? And then Matt or John, do you have a projected timeline on when the Hudson study will be done? Or maybe you guys.
I can actually take both.
Okay, great.
We're happy to review the 119 suggestion. Hoboken is as congested as Jersey City is, and I wouldn't want to create a new problem. I think one of the solutions possibly to bunching that we can explore together is to reduce the number of stops that these buses go to. Because if you're sitting on the bus and you got to stop 60 times before you get to your destination, it's frustrating. So we should probably work on that as an initial effort to try and deal with the bunching issue. But we can certainly explore the Hoboken pathway to split the 119, and we'll do that. As far as the new bus Hudson study is concerned, that is concluding. The majority of the work has been done. We are now finalizing recommendations, and all of the observations are starting to come into a draft final report for us to review. I have not seen it yet, but this was one of our most comprehensive studies out of all of them, because the impact is so significant because of the volumes here.
Mike, is it just about schedule, or is there a budget allocation question as well in there?
So one of the things we wanted to make sure we did was to come up with recommendations that are necessary, sort of separate from the budget issue, to make sure that we're serving the public as they need and deserve.
Yep.
Without, sort of backing into it by saying, well, here's how much money we have, what can we do for nothing?
Right, right, right.
So now it's a matter of determining what is the best way to go about it. Some of it's origin and destination based. Some of it is volume based. Some of it is just what lines are running where. There were a bunch of surveys done, origin and destination for customers. A lot of things have changed since we set these lines up 45 years ago, and some of them even more. So it is a huge study, and it's taken months and months to complete. So I don't have a ton of detailed information about it. We're waiting for those things to come out.
2 sub-part follow-up. One, if we don't tell Kris Kolluri you're the source, are there any spoilers you can share with us about what will come out of the new bus study? And if it's premature, then is there going to be an opportunity for us to discuss a draft before? I know it's just recommendations, so it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to adopt them, but before they finalize it, will there be an opportunity to maybe discuss the preliminary findings?
So one of the things that is an advantage in this community is the engagement and the interest and, frankly, the expertise that exists here that can help us, come to those solutions. So we're happy to
That's
participate
Jersey City
in
and
that.
Hoboken for you.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of options here and a lot of people who really understand sort of the challenges here. So, yes, short answer is we're happy to engage. There's a huge stakeholder engagement component of that.
Thank you. Okay. So one questioner asked if there is any plan to have a transit option other than bus because of reliability and inconsistency issues with bus service. And Journal Square, Hoboken stations are 30-plus minute walks. Buses often take just as long. So just kind of zooming out for a second in looking at the future.
This is one of my favorite policy questions. I spent 8 years in Camden thinking about sort of the last mile, first mile problem. This gets to a bit of this issue. How do you solve a gap that exists between people and a transportation hub? It doesn't have to be a big hub, like access to transportation is probably the better way to say it. Often, there are gaps that exist between employers and employees, and strictly from a transportation standpoint. Hospitals and residents, food destination and residents. The way you fix that problem systemically is, and Jersey City already has done it in a really, I think, an extraordinary implemented case study by using VIA. VIA is the local bus that sort of picks up people. I don't know how much they charge, but I think it's like $1.50 or whatever it is. $2? Okay. But what that has done is outside of this very complex, I'll say cumbersome, system where we are driven by certain designated Title VI requirements, you now have a separate last mile and first mile solution that is driven by municipalities. That is a fundamentally important component of how you solve this global issue of transportation. But what you can't have is overlaid systems that lead to congestion. And that's the balance you have to strike. You have to identify pockets of residents that don't have access to reliable transportation and try to fix it that way. And VIA has done it in a way that I think it's now in Jersey City and in Camden, and they may be in Newark, I'm not sure, but it is working extraordinarily well. In Camden, they're connecting employers to employees. It's a very specific system. That's all it does. Here, it's a little bit more broadly, right? I think it runs around sort of the system. So my advice is we need to be a little bit more open-minded on how you do it. The bottom line for that, though, is it is a private operator. That means you have to invest $1 for them to give you back $1. You don't get to invest $1 in get to lose 54 cents like we do, right? So that is the problem. So there is no free lunch in that sense, even though you're eating a nice donut for free, I think. But I want to make sure that this is something that we have to think about collectively on how to bridge that gap. And I think a solution like VIA is imperative in the long run to sort of to be part of this patchwork of transportation systems.
So we're going to turn. I know that Kris has a hard stop in about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so. So we're going to turn to live Q&A from the attendees after this last question. Quickly, if we can touch upon, for those of your riders who may be uniquely but nevertheless extraordinarily abled, could we put in, can we look at putting in bus shelters or benches along Palisade Avenue and elsewhere in the Heights?
Absolutely. Look, I mean, this is a issue that comes up in municipalities. It is, you would think this is an easy issue, but I think it's an important issue. We will, if you, Senator, will work with your office, and if there is a spots that you think we need to look at, we're happy to look at it.
Did you have a suggestion or?
Well, I just want to say the bus. I'm the person who requested that they put in the bench question. And specifically, I have been in contact with your Deputy Chief of Staff and have not heard back from him in quite a while. And so Ian McDaniel, I believe?
He has not been with us for a
I see.
year. Okay.
Okay, I wish
Yeah,
I
just
could
give us a
update on
call.
that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Would have been nice, but that's good to know.
It should be
Thank-
bouncing back. There's a
Yeah.
bounce back. His
Yeah.
email's been
Yeah,
gone for a year.
have noticed that there are shelters that have opened up along Central Avenue. I was told that those were funded by NJ Transit and not the city. But
So, yeah, typically the way I think we do it, Mike, is we provide it, and the city has an obligation to maintain it. So look,
Right.
this is the other thing, okay? And this always happens. We do it, and the city doesn't maintain it, and then we get yelled at. So,
Well-
I'm so glad you're engaged in this issue.
Yeah.
I expect you to be then the police person.
We'll yell
on
at the
this.
city about maintenance
Okay,
if you install them for us.
Great.
I
we'll
mean,
take
I
it
will
after.
just say, as someone who is a regular volunteer at Riverview Park, as Roger will also confirm, the city is quite comfortable installing things and then not budgeting to maintain them. So I would say, I won't let that, maybe don't let that stop them from installing some benches.
Well, look, I mean, the one thing I will say about the benches that, and this is my suggestion to think about, in some instances, when there are benches within the bus shelters, it leads to unhoused, making that into a place where they can sleep. That's an issue that you want to think about. This is for every solution, there's another challenge, and I see that, and in some municipalities, we've been asked to take out the benches because it sort of became a place for people to come and just live, because it gave you a great place for people to sit and sleep.
Nonetheless, here and in New York, you will regularly see those people where you don't see the benches provided. They choose the ground because they have no other options. So I don't find that a very compelling.
Well, look,
Rationale.
the question isn't a question of compelling. Again, I hope I get your email because I'm happy to send you pictures and I'm happy to ask your help.
Elvin.
Hi, good afternoon. I just want to touch, for what I understand, Engine Transit is about to get about 800 million plus for the transit fee that is going to apply for corporations.
Yes, sir.
And that's great because you've been talking about shortage on funding. I also want to see, and that maybe Senator McChrystal can also help with that. We get a lot of developers coming to Jersey City and a lot of construction. Perhaps another way to create sources of funding is creating a transit fee for new developers here so we can have more resources to create more, maybe provide more buses and get more, people moving throughout the city. Because this, we got to make sure that the people are able to get to their jobs and, commute, because there is no parking here and everybody rely on the public service for transit. So I would like to see those funds that are already set to come in 2026 to create, more buses available for the community, and also maybe creating another transit fee for developers here in Jersey City.
On briefly, because it would take a whole other roundtable for us to talk about the unfairness and how we're being shortchanged, how commuters are being shortchanged, how urban communities are being shortchanged with the lack of truly dedicated recurring revenue for New Jersey Transit. Again, no fault of theirs. But legislatures, governors of both parties, a pox on both our houses for years, have been kicking the can down the road. I would encourage you all to re-review my op-ed on NJ.com about this when the Jersey Journal was still a thing. Essentially in California, Massachusetts, certain other jurisdictions, they have formulas that fund their transit systems that draw on a variety of revenue sources. The key is the diversity of that, because again, CBT, recessions, politicians can let it sunset and things like that, as we have. And so, which I oppose for the record, but again, not all of my colleagues agree with me on the importance of mass transit and the prioritization of mass transit and NJT. So the diversity of those sources and the consistency and the reliability of these sources are really important. So you have sales tax, fuel taxes, vehicle fees, local assessments, and greenhouse gas reduction funds, just as examples of what some other transit agency uses. We have had capital to operating fund transfers, which you've sort of calmed down on. But we've also transferred funds from the Clean Energy Fund, which I don't think is the best option. We rely on farebox revenue. The agreement with the Turnpike Authority is temporary. I think that should be codified into statute. Story for another day. I also think that the Turnpike expansion, and on this, the administration and I respectfully disagree with one another. I think the Turnpike expansion should be canceled. And then we have a very meager state subsidy and dwindling federal funding. ARPA and all of that has dried up. So New Jersey Transit really, I can't underscore Kris's point enough that the legislature and the governor should be working together on long-term, codified, dedicated, recurring revenue sources, or we're going to be having these discussions every other year. But I do appreciate the point. There is something I'm working on with John Tarani. We have that would allow sort of surcharges on developments, as well as a voter-passed surcharge like we have with open space and the arts to go toward transit funding. But I don't yet have buy-in from my colleagues in the legislature, but happy to work with you on that kind of idea. Next question.
Hi, everyone. Kris, just if I can get kind of your thoughts on what can we as a city, and there's a lot of great groups. I see Bike JCs here, Hilton County Complete Streets. RNA is very vocal, and you know, they've pushed, I think, the issue forward. But what can the city itself do, you know, the mayor, council, to make NJ Transit function better? Anything in terms of planning, anything in terms of any ideas you might have?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we just talked about this idea of a dedicated bus lane, right? I think if we operate as government writ large in a balkanized manner, you end up with what we have right now. That is, you're seeing evidence of that playing out, especially in a city that is growing leaps and bounds. And the only way to get to a solution that works is the state, the county, and the municipality, especially in a place like this, and the senator talked about the density, is you have to have harmonization for planning purposes and implementation purposes. I'll give you one other example. No point in adding more bus lines if the DOT from the state starts construction without telling somebody. No point in adding 4 more lines if the municipality decides to reroute a route without telling New Jersey Transit. This happens all the time. No fault of the institution that is advancing, but I think we're so used to working in silos that it works okay if you're in a rural area or a suburban area where you're able to sort of move around with a little bit more ease without losing valuable minutes in a person who's trying to get to work and trying to get to, whether it's off-peak or peak. It leads to the bus bunching that Mike is talking about. I think in the end, my suggestion would be every year we send a capital plan to the legislature every year, as required by law, and is to have a meeting with the municipalities and the counties in a jurisdiction like Hudson and say, here is the request from the neighborhoods. Here's what we are practically able to do, because look, I mean, let's say we decide we're going to add 2 more lines or revise the lines we talked about during peak and off-peak, whatever, is to make sure there is understanding and agreement from all parties that we're going to work together to make sure there's not going to be any impediments to it. I'm telling you, we will be wasting enormous resources on all sides if there's no cooperation and collaboration. That is the only way you move through an area like this. And I talked about this idea of a last mile, first mile. I really mean it. This cannot be a state-only solution. You have to have the privates play a role in it. Yes, it may cost a little bit more. I will be the first to say that to you. I'm actually shocked that VIA is able to do it for $2. I bet you there's a subsidy from Jersey City. Okay, so I'm just saying that there is a solution there. I think that's how we stitch this together.
Kris, thank you so much. I actually I want to touch base on this point about VIA, but very, very quickly. I mean, you talk about additional bus lines. What is the cost, just ballpark, of an additional bus line?
Yeah, we just said $800,000.
$800,000
Per bus.
Per bus, one bus. So I mean, I was looking at this conversation about VIA. The subsidy the city provides per ride is $11 per passenger. So it's $2 and then $11 as part of the private sector. One of the things that we're talking about in our campaign is about a fast and free bus system, sort of a subsidy on top of NJ Transit, a municipal-run bus system that can sort of operate in a lot of the transit deserts and sort of move additional people. Because one of the problems we see with VIA is, let's say 3 of us are taking VIA from here after this meeting, and I'm going to Journal Square, Patrick is going to Greenville, and someone else is going to downtown. That same VIA is going to pick us up. It's going to take 45 minutes to get around the city. And again, the subsidy for the city is extremely expensive. So when we think about solutions from cities and municipalities, I mean, this has happened across the country in Boston, in places like New York City and Philadelphia, especially in very dense towns. The concept of having a city-run bus system, first I want to ask about viability, because that's something that we're proposing. And the second thing I want to say is, how can that work in conjunction with NJ Transit to make sure that we're working together in collaboration so that the lines that you're running, we can make sure our buses are running separately?
Yeah, look, I mean, I'll say this to you, and Mike suggested one way to reduce bunching is to maybe reduce the number of stops, right, on one day. I mean, and by the way, the people whose stops are going to go away, we'll be calling him and saying, what happened to my stop? Now, the way you try to address it is perhaps by making sure there's a way to pick up some of those folks and take them to where the demand exists in the next stop or 2 stops from. That's number one. Number 2 is, look, this subsidy issues, you're now just seeing it play out in real time. $11. That is the real cost of operating the bus system. And that's because it's a private sector operation. If this were to be given to New Jersey Transit, you would pay $3 and say, eat the rest, right? So I actually think this is the way you get to a solution in the end. My only ask is that as you think about introducing this and making it a reality, which I hope it does one day, that it doesn't add to the congestion problem that exists by sort of overlapping services on times and on roads that are already congested. That's why I think I'm telling you a dedicated bus lane with a signal preference, not just a bus lane, signal preference for our buses and maybe the city buses is the way to do it. And I'll add one more thing real quick. I think we need to think about broadly decentralizing services. This may be a bit controversial, but let me just hear me out. Not every bus, forget size, is going to have the demand. What does that look like? Maybe the answer is a smaller service, as long as it doesn't congest roads. And it may just be an SUV. I know it sounds outrageous in terms of, oh my God, I can't believe we're going to provide people SUVs. But if the idea is to move people from point A to point B in the most efficient way possible, outside of what New Jersey Transit is thinking about, you really want to think about decentralizing this thing.
So just to follow up on that, so if we do get a city-run bus system, do we have a commitment from NJ Transit to work with us in collaboration to make that really effective?
Look, if you have a city system, we would love to work with you to understand what your schedule looks like. Sure.
Fantastic.
Mike?
We'll have to avoid early discussions with the union about that, but we're happy to explore options. So to your point, one of the things that mass transit does very, very well is runs volumes of people up a single road. That's really the art of a bus system. And if we're running down the boulevard, that's what we do well. What we don't do so well is bring these 40-foot and 60-foot diesel buses into your neighborhoods. So the answer really is microtransit. And there are so many communities that are starting to enact these other efforts to feed that main line bus system up the boulevard on a dedicated lane. We're starting a pilot program in Monmouth County that has electric vans that we are replacing our 45-foot diesel buses with, and we're bringing them into the neighborhoods, that are going past people's homes. And the concept is to sort of become our own VIA. It's running with New Jersey Transit operators, and what we're doing is we're taking those diesel buses that get less than 3 miles per gallon out of people's neighborhoods. We have a demand response model that we're going to be piloting. This should start in January. I don't want to tell you how long it's taken to stand this up, but so that is the concept that you're referring to, and as we run this pilot, we'll start to see the things that we need to enhance and the challenges that we're facing regarding that. But there's a lot of opportunity in that model, and we're excited about its opportunity.
All right, we have time for about 3 questions left. I know we have Jake and Veronica in the queue. Is there anyone who is not a candidate for municipal office that has a question? Okay. Can we prioritize them, Brendan? I'm teasing. So we'll probably have time for 1 question after that. But go ahead, Jake.
No, truly, if anyone who's not a candidate running for office wants to go, I'm happy
Well,
to hear from
well, a lot of candidates went, so it's only fair you and Veronica get to ask.
I appreciate it. Thanks for making the time. Yeah, I want to dig a little bit more into what my friend Musa was saying about the fast and free, because it seems like if we had NJ Transit, and maybe this is a bit wild or a bit long term, if we had like totally free bus fare for NJ Transit, I mean, what we're seeing in other places that do this is that it's way faster because there's no time that the bus has to stop for collection, that bus drivers are actually safer because we see assaults on bus drivers happen around collection as unfortunately a too frequent occurrence. And then also, obviously, this is saving working people who rely on transit a ton of money. So one thing I'm wondering about is how much literally does it cost to actually collect revenue? Because obviously revenue is coming in from bus fares, but there is a cost to just the operation of collecting the revenue itself. I'm curious about that. But even if this would, be spending a ton of money to ensure free bus fare, the savings of just the public good of transit seem pretty massive here. And if we start from a place of knowing that this is not a profit-making venture, as was mentioned earlier here, like private companies don't do this for a reason. It is not a profit-making venture. So then it becomes a question of, and maybe this is more directed to Senator Mukherjee, like a political will, right? That we need to have the political will to make sure we get long-term, like proactive, robust revenue for our transit system, even if we know we're going to take a hit and we're going to have to eat a lot of costs to provide the public good of the public transit that this neighborhood and this city deserves.
And before I turn it over to Kris, just to give you an idea. So MTA, a couple years ago, their budget, $7.5 billion, 40%, the largest revenue source in their budget, comes from dedicated taxes or fees generated by the communities the MTA serves. What do you think the percentage is at New Jersey Transit? Like 5%, right? Just one state over, just to give you an idea. So I do think that is largely a question of political will. But Kris.
Well, look, I mean, it fundamentally comes down to this question of, so how do you make up for it? Right? And there's only one answer, and the senator suggested. The money flows from the legislature, And you have to sort of have this decision and the discussion to say, okay, so if we're not going to get that 46 cents on the dollar return system-wide, well, where do we make up that 46 plus the 54? That's essentially the question. It's as simple as that. Yeah, look, I mean, we're already losing 54 cents, so it doesn't matter how much. Even if you waive it, you're only exasperating the loss, is what I'm suggesting. It's not like you're spending more money. You're already losing. You've already started at a 54 cents deficit. So all I'm saying is, it doesn't matter whether it's 10 cents or 5 cents. It'll only exasperate the problem. So fundamentally, what you're asking for is, how do you go to a free system? And the question really is, how do you replace the dollar for dollar with another form of revenue?
Oh, you
That's
had
it.
a mic.
Yes, I have a mic, yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Thanks.
All right, Veronica, sorry.
Thanks, I'm standing so I can see you better, Kris. Hi, Veronica Keswa. And, you know, to piggyback off of what you were saying earlier about the need for streamlining collaboration and cooperation among multiple agencies at different levels of government to kind of come together and share information and communicate to solve some of these problems, I can't help but thinking about the data and infrastructure gap and the role in that, and if there are any plans to have a GPS integration with an open data system. I have a background in data and government innovation, so it seems to me we can track packages very easily with logistics, but we can't do it with buses and people as easily and when it's not private funded. So I wanted to know if there's been a vision for sort of an open data system where the city, at the city level, can share any, construction or roadway work happening. And at the county level, that can be done too. And, then that trickles up, to whatever other agencies would have a stake in access to this sort of data. And I think it would also, benefit the public to have access to data like this. Just to say another thing, in the private sector, I know people are, tracked based on their credit cards and, their phone pinging the Wi-Fi system. So there are ways to do it. And I think some people even might opt into something like that if we need to track people better to understand how they're moving. And then some of these problems can, these are some, using data to, just what the data's role could be.
Look, I mean, I'll just answer it. Look, privacy issues aside, right? I mean, which is as long as the data is anonymized, to understand demand movements and supply movements, we would be all in for it. Even today, through a subscription, because I've seen this data in play, you can understand the movement of people anonymized through Verizon and T-Mobile. There's a cost to it. Sometimes it's a lot of money. These credit card companies, as I'm sure you understand, pay a lot of money because that kind of data is very rich and very valuable to them. From a government standpoint, we have started this conversation about how to build dashboards to make some of this data forward customer facing. And for me, we'll just stick with construction for 1 minute. It isn't that difficult a task for the municipality, the county, and the state to be coordinated on construction projects. Everything we have is already online. We just need to make sure they are interfaced correctly. So no point in us building a road when PSE&G comes 3 months behind us, digs up the road and builds a new trunk line through the road we just built. That happens all the time. So I think this is a matter of this kind of collaboration is a luxury that we just haven't had because we've been literally living hand to mouth for 45 years. We are at an inflection point. We're not out of the woods, as the senator correctly said, because the window he's talking about is 4 years or 5 years of corporate transit fees, which has to grow by $200 million a year. But your precise suggestion is literally not a question of will, it's a question of resource, and I'm suggesting to you we're in the beginning stages of doing that.
After Kris leaves, unrelated to New Jersey Transit, helicopters, anything else, I'm happy to stay for 15, 20 additional minutes if anyone has any additional questions, since the RNAs here. But last question for New Jersey Transit. Go ahead.
Sure. So my name's Ayla. I'm with Bike JC, and I was wondering, going back to what you were saying earlier about first and last mile connections, most of the buses around here don't have bike racks on the front, and I actually was just looking at the NJT website, and it says only about half of the fleet is equipped with the bike racks on the front. And I was just wondering why that is, and if there's anything we can do to add those here, because I think that's a big missed opportunity for folks who maybe their destination isn't exactly on the route, and then they can take their bike
It's a
the
great
rest of
question.
the way.
Mike? Yeah, of course.
So the short answer is that almost every bus that operates through here goes to the Port Authority bus terminal in New York at some point during its day. We can't have bike racks on the front of these buses going through the Lincoln Tunnel because you can't tow them if something happens with the bus. And then as you go into the Port Authority bus terminal, which as everyone knows is antiquated, there's a full sawtooth that the bus pulls into and won't fit with a bike rack on the front of it all the way up to the front. So anything that's running to New York is not supposed to have a bike rack on it. Sometimes you're pulling something off a local line because you're trying to fill the piece of work to make sure you're picking people up, and it's a bus that's not necessarily intended for that route that you'll see an occasional bike rack on, but it's not supposed to have it on it if it's going to New York. That's the short answer.
Is there any opportunity with building the new Port Authority bus terminal for that to change, do you think? Or
The new Port Authority bus terminal is being completely designed with workshops with New Jersey Transit. I've spent the last 3 years of my life contributing to that effort. All of those platforms will be relaxed sawtooths, which means when you pull out, you don't need to back up. You can pull directly out. They're all built for 60-foot buses. It'll be a game changer. And all of these problems with the infrastructure and the limits in the Port Authority, the ability to add service should all go away when the new Port Authority is built in a short 10 years from now.
By the way, I think this is one where the senator and the legislature deserves a lot of credit. Look, I just came off the Hudson Tunnel project, which is $16 billion, and that's going to provide resiliency and redundancy to the 115-year-old tunnels that currently exist. The Port Authority bus terminal is $10 billion, and that started construction about 3 weeks ago or whenever we were there. I think when you look at those as two bookend projects, this state and this region in particular, right here in northern Jersey, is going to be the beneficiary of two unbelievably modern systems that are 115 years in the making. So, yep. Please.
Last question. Thank you, Manuel.
I'm a co-founder of Hudson County Complete Streets with a few other people here. And my question is, do you personally oppose the Turnpike expansion? And if so, have you had any conversations with Governor Murphy about transferring some of that $35 billion Turnpike capital plan to the state that then in turn could be one of the funding streams for transit?
The best thing about having a job like this is you get to stay in your lane, and I'm staying in the transit lane.
It's all transportation.
I understand.
My name is Andy. I live right here. I take the 123, 119 bus frequently. I'm here on behalf of my son, who's visually impaired, and the blind community, and try to advocate for them on training your drivers on how to properly identify and pull over for a blind or visually impaired rider. On too many occasions, we have been blown right by because a blind person we have to wave the bus down. How is a blind person supposed to wave a bus down that they cannot see? The buses roll right past us. We've been at the bus stop numerous times, straight by without even pulling over at the stop. Is there a way to train your drivers or make them aware, not only on these lines, but on all lines, to properly identify a blind or visually impaired person?
I'm sure, Mike. It's a really important question. I had the privilege of meeting your son.
So we do train operators specifically regarding ADA. They have a full day of it. We reinforce that. You're not required to wave a bus down. The driver might tell you that, but the fact is that if there's somebody standing in a bus stop, the bus is supposed to pull over and offer transportation. The challenge with the blind community is you can't report the bus necessarily because it's hard to identify it.
Is that right? Matt, can you get his number?
So
Right.
remember,
We'll get it from you.
The benefit of technology today is I have cameras in the bus and I can watch it happen. It's not, your word against the word of the operator. I've got the best witness you can have. We are very serious about this. Your complaint is not wasted. We might not call you back and tell you what happened with the operator because there are privacy concerns. But I assure you that it is a serious offense when it comes to the list of violations that an operator is subject to. And an ADA violation is an automatic one-day suspension for the first offense. So understand that it is not something that's ignored. We might not tell you exactly what happened, but be assured that something has. And your complaint is verifiable. It's not something that you need to become overly involved in. But the more information you give us about these types of events, the better the system gets all the time. So we have a process right online. You can put it in online. Those concerns go right to the garage management, who then looks at the camera, verifies the complaint, brings the driver in with their union, and we manage the process. Sometimes it's retraining. Sometimes it's a combination of retraining and discipline. But the object is to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And just keep up with us, and we're happy to help.
But before, I'm going to have Matt talk to you and get the information so we can follow up. Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks again for coming and for your willingness to listen and for your contemplated responsiveness to everything we've discussed and for your leadership.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Senator, I'll just say to you and your constituents, and Katie and all the other folks, whether you're running for office or not, I am actually very in a good place on bus transit system for this reason. While train is about 75% during weekdays, pre-COVID numbers, weekends I think we're doing much better on train. Bus is at or over capacity already pre-COVID numbers. This is, it may sound odd, but this is a good problem. That means that the demand exists. The evidence of that is right in this room. And this is exactly what we need to demonstrate to the legislature and others. There's going to be a gubernatorial election that is going to result in a new governor coming in. We need to continue talking about the importance of moving people in the most safe and efficient manner, and the bus is the most accessible way in a community like this. And it is impossible to build a train line in every community, but you can certainly try to amplify the bus service we have, and that can only happen if we have this kind of collaboration and dedication, number one. Number two is I'm respectfully asking you to never forget that this is not a profit-making enterprise. And that means we have to make sure we're acutely aware of the cost consideration when we ask and when we deliver. No point in delivering you a subpar service and say we just did it. That is not what the answer is. The answer has to be we did it for the right reasons, and we did it in the best expectations that you have of us. And for that to happen, we have to have the proper funding and this kind of dedication. And look, I'm here for 8 more months. I intend to follow up with the senator with the questions that were raised and to see if we can sort of really work together on some of these. I'm already happy to hear that we have a pathway on addressing some of these questions. I look forward to working with you, and I really want to thank all of you for coming out on a weekend to do this. Thank you.
Am I on? Nope, sorry, we're still going.
10 more minutes. 10 more minutes.
10, 15 more. Okay. And can we just once again, in addition to Jonas and Charlie, can we thank Brendan and his leadership at RNA for advocating on this and so many other issues? Floor is open on any topic.
Now, as the senator mentioned, the scope is now enlarged into things like helicopters, anything around state funding, state policy. We have about 10 minutes, so if there's any questions, the senator's been generous with his time, so happy to answer any questions you have. Just raise your hand, we'll bring the mic over to you. And while I have the mic, the question that most folks might ask is about the helicopter issue. You brought it up yourself. It's a federal issue, it's a complicated issue. We had the tragic accident about a month ago. Just could you give us a current update about where it is in terms of policy and what can be done? I know it's a national and a state issue as well, but just want to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. Putting aside the fact that that operator in particular has been plagued by a number of issues, including safety issues, over the years, our community has suffered over 30 helicopter crashes in just the past 40 years. That is bat excrement crazy. I think, so although because of the Federal Aviation Act and federal laws that preempt a lot of what states and municipalities can do, not everything is preempted. There is there's some narrow room using our noise and policing power that subdivisions can act and states can act. We are a few people from this community, and I want to thank Philippia for her organizing a number of advocates to come down and testify in Trenton. Our next assemblywoman was there speaking on this issue as well. We have a bill. So we have a couple of bills in, right? One is an outright ban. It's probably preempted by federal law. And so we're not advancing that one. We have another that would require the heliports or the operators of vertical rotary wing aircraft, which are heliports and helipads, to reduce by 47%, not random or plucked from a hat. I'll explain that in a second. The number of non-essential flights out of their facilities, and we also restrict the hours during which they can operate. And the advocates and the county executive recently had a meeting that suggested the mayor and the municipal governing body of Kearney is moving in the right direction, because we think that based on testimony that was offered during the land use approval process for that heliport, they lied or are not adhering to what they committed when they received their municipal approvals, right? So that the municipality may have some recourse there if they take action. Now, there was a lawsuit in New York, went up to the Second Circuit, National Helicopter Corporation of America versus New York City, with respect to the extent to which federal aviation laws preempt state and local laws in airspace. And because New York City owns the facilities in question, it's on their property, they're the landlord, they can do certain things that we cannot just as the landlord, but it's not using their regulatory authority. But our DOT licenses these facilities, which New York City doesn't. So that's why, although we've been told it's susceptible to, that they're going to legally challenge this bill, it is moving through the process. It has passed the Senate Transportation Committee. We expect it will be posted for a vote by the Senate President and the full body. I think the Assembly bill is working its way through the process as well, Harris. I don't know if it's not been through committee yet, but it's going to be. Okay. So that will offer us some relief, but it truly is, unfortunately, and this is frustrating for me, it mostly is a federal issue. And, Disney has a special rule about these types of flights, and it's like restricted airspace over Disney. So I would like to believe that children in our neighborhood at their homes, that their lives, that our safety, that our quality of life is as important as when they're on vacation, if they, have the luxury of being able to go to Disney World. I know that at times the FAA has been responsive to certain concerns about routes from folks in the Hamptons, and you would hope that diverse urban communities would get that kind of deference. But we'll continue to work with our federal lawmakers to fight on this issue. But in the meantime, I think that the state bill has a good chance of moving. I can't make representations as to what the courts will do, but 47% was used because that's what was permitted as a reference after some studies were done in that federal lawsuit in New York. So out of an abundance of caution, that's what the nonpartisan drafters of laws at the OLS, stands for the Office of Legislative Services. It's like the state equivalent of the CRS, had suggested we do. That's how they drafted it. And that's the update on at least the state bill. Yes. Oh, yes. I love that. Yeah. We are working on a per seat gross receipts assessment to tax non-essential helicopter flights. We're looking to put it into this budget. Yeah. So I'm in good faith. I'm representing to you that this is intended to be a revenue raiser, but I will not complain if it taxes it enough to make these flights prohibitive. But that is not the goal. In good faith, it is a budget revenue raising goal. But both things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
Correct.
To build on, thank you for asking that. That was going to be my exact question, Filippo. Just to build on it, where would that revenue go? Could we make sure it's earmarked to go to the areas that are being impacted directly? Could we make sure revenue is actually coming to, like, a credit to Jersey City, a credit to Hoboken? Like,
it's not in the governor's proposal.
Okay.
And because of how much of a reach it is at this point in the process to get into the appropriations law, screw these operators that have no regard to our quality of life, our safety. I would just be delighted to get it in at this point. And if to build a coalition to do that, that means that it can go into the general fund. That would be okay. It would make it more difficult to allocate it specifically to our community because we need 120 legislators, or we at least need a majority of 120 legislators. We need agreement with the Senate President, the Speaker of the Assembly, and the Governor to add this to the budget. And if it's just being allocated to the benefit, because this is parochial business lawmaking, if it's just being allocated to a district that benefits 4 to 6 of those 120, it dramatically reduces the likelihood that it will be part of the budget, the final product. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I mean, is there anything that would
I know when to reach, though, and I'm working on different ways because I want to restore $4 million. The school funding formula supposed to cut us $90 million to Jersey City schools this year, thanks to negotiations between myself, leadership, and the governor over the last 3 fiscal years. Last year, we saw 0. This year, we saw 4 instead of 90. I'm trying to get that 4 restored. So that's a priority. That'll also come out of the general fund. So whatever it comes in, what comes out, kind of, it might wash. And we might end up with the net outcome that you're hoping for and that I'm hoping for. But to get this per seat tax in, we're working with the advocates to try to make sure that it's added. The front office, the governor's office, is open to it, but it's just very late in the process from where the budget was proposed in February. Okay. So we're not looking to specifically. Generally, when we're putting stuff into the budget, you're raising it as revenue, and then the appropriations are elsewhere.
Right.
Does that make sense? So it's usually not specifically diverted.
Yes.
So when it comes to the helicopters, I think part of the problem is the elevation of the helicopter, the higher it is, the more tolerable the noise is. And what I'm seeing, I live right on the cliffs. What I'm seeing is when they approach from Manhattan, they don't seem to take into account that we're like 150 or 200 feet above sea level. And they're not adjusting their elevation to go higher. So is there any way to control their elevation or track it to make sure that they're at the proper height?
I cannot touch them when they're in the air. The town cannot touch them when they're in the air. The state cannot touch them when they're in the air. That is expressly preempted by the Federal Aviation Act. That can only be regulated by the FAA and Congress. Now, unfortunately, or they wouldn't be in the air. But the FAA has told us, and this is part of the problem with the helicopters, that they are deliberately forced to fly at lower altitudes so that they're not competing with fixed-wing aircraft in the air, given the volume of air traffic serving Teterboro, Newark Liberty, JFK, LaGuardia, Philippia. You were about to add, or was that the point you were going to make? Yeah. Is it what are we doing? $50 a seat? What are we proposing? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. Enforcement issue, JCPD. Did everyone hear the question? Okay. That there's little or no enforcement on blocking the box. And what can we do to get the Jersey City Police Department? So we should have you talked to your city council person about it? And we will, but. I have not, okay. I got you here, so. 100%. We'll go to it's the city, but we will add it to our list of grievances. But we'll talk to, we can raise it with the city council folks and with the JCPD and talk about and ask what they can do about stepping up enforcement on that. In general, traffic enforcement is not great here. That's a way of putting it, yeah. Just being diplomatic.
We have one last question.
Or I can write them.
Yeah, we'll definitely follow. We can pass it along to them. If they're specific to transit and they're operational, then I'm probably not equipped to speak for the agency.
I can write these down and send them to you. I mean, it's mostly about, how they're working with NJDOT to move ahead with certain dedicated bus lanes. Like, we really need a dedicated bus lane between West Jersey City, like the west side, and Newark over the 1 and 9, the Hackensack River Bridge. There is so much traffic that could be alleviated, and just their plans for,
Were you here when we talked a little bit about dedicated bus lanes at the beginning of the conversation, or was that before?
I heard you say that you were going to talk to the county, but I missed the beginning.
Okay.
So
you should definitely get us your suggestions. We'll include that in our follow-up with Kris Kolluri and his team.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, Transit's going to say, we can't create the dedicated bus lanes. That's going to be up to the state or the county or the municipality. So I'm happy to advocate with other government agencies for you.
Like, how do they work with NJDOT? Because those are two state agencies with the same commissioner. Fran.
Yeah. Right. He's on the board of New Jersey Transit. So Kris is an interesting, I know he's only there for another 8 or 9 months, but he's an interesting NJ Transit CEO in that he used to be the transportation commissioner, so he had his chairman's old job under Governor Corzine. And it might be actually a unique opportunity for us to get transit to lobby for themselves in a way that maybe in the past staff director would have been reluctant to do as vocally.
That would be amazing
before a board
because
chair.
We have enough roadways. So why are they building a new BRT across, to get to the Meadowlands? Or why are they studying BRT on the Greenway, which is supposed to be bike ped exclusive, and there's not enough space for both in narrow portions of it in Kearney, rather than putting BRT on existing roadways? It doesn't seem like the NJDOT and NJ Transit. Yeah. Speaking of silos, there's new Hudson bus study coming out. We didn't have anything like this back in October when they put out a survey. So.
Yeah, and when you point to a motorist traffic issue, what you're actually doing is you're just inducing demand with respect to cars, because which is the same problem with the highway expansions. But yeah, but if you have specific dedicated lane suggestions, and get it to us.
Sure.
I think we're at time. I just want to take a moment to thank the senator, his staff, for making this happen. This has been a year-long effort, so really, you've been such a great partner to work with. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see some progress come out of it. But we did. it was promising that we got like almost of this order of 60 articulated buses, we got almost all 60. So the community's advocacy has been effective. Like it's a demonstration of why this matters.
Thank you. And I think Charlie's going to make sure we make some progress. So, thank you.